So Erick Ford is our moderator, and Erick will be introducing the panel. Erick combines nearly 2 decades of public sector leadership and private sector experience in the energy industry. He brings a keen understanding of the strategies and approaches to shaping and affecting policy through collaboration with trade groups, community groups, businesses, and municipal stakeholders. Erick advises businesses in the utility, energy, hydrogen, energy, software development, and renewable energy sectors. He has a much longer biography, but we want to hear from everyone. So, Erick, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Ray. Good afternoon. Thanks again, Ray, for that introduction. My apologies. My wife called. I had to take the call. So I should listen to her more often, put it that way. So I'm Erick Ford, president of the New Jersey Energy Coalition. I'm also vice president at Stevens Lee Public Affairs, and it's an honor to be with you guys today. So we have 3 fantastic panelists with us. We have Crystal, who is from Atlantic Shores Wind. We have Janice Fuller from Anbaric, and then Damian from Attentive, right? That's kidding. Right. Yeah. So what I thought we might do is first go down the line, everybody introduce themselves real quick, starting with Janice, and then we'll go from there.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Erick. Hi, everyone. It's nice to see new and old faces. Today, I'm Janice Fuller. I'm the Mid-Atlantic president for Anbaric Development. Anbaric is a small Massachusetts-based transmission development company. We've been in the transmission development business for a little over 2 decades, first starting in the merchant transmission business, helping to develop the Hudson and the Neptune lines that connect New Jersey and New York, and then pivoting towards offshore wind transmission about 5 or 6 years ago. We focus mainly in the New England and Mid-Atlantic region, both working on the policy side of how transmission for offshore wind should be approached, and also doing project development in offshore wind transmission and large-scale battery storage. I've been with the company for about just under 5 years, and I know some of you from my previous capacity when I was working for Congressman Pallone and in Trenton in the gubernatorial administrations of Corzine and McGreevey before that. Nice to be here.
Thank you. Damian.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming out today and listening to our panel. I'm Damian Bednarz. I'm the managing director of Attentive Energy. I feel like following the last speaker, I have to just state the obvious. I believe in climate change. I believe it's man-made. I believe there's a solution space to all of this, and we're going to talk about that here today for those who are interested. So as background on Attentive Energy, we have recently proposed a bid into New Jersey's 3rd offshore wind solicitation. We've been on the ground in New Jersey now for well over 4 years, really getting a good idea of what is needed, also what is missing, and also where we can take the state forward with offshore wind development. I've been with the company now for 4 years coming up in January, and it's just an exciting space, and we're very much looking forward to telling you more about Attentive Energy and the opportunity here in New Jersey.
Crystal.
Thanks, Erick. Hello, everyone. My name is Crystal Pruitt. I'm from Atlantic Shores Offshore Wind. You can't forget the offshore when say our name. So Atlantic Shores Offshore Wind is a 50-50 joint venture between Shell and EDF Renewables, 2 powerhouse multinational companies that got together and let's go half on offshore wind. So we are a round 2 winner. We are committed to the state of New Jersey to generate about 1,500 megawatts of power, but our full developable area, leasing area, is about just over 5 gigawatts, so that's a tremendous amount of energy we have the potential to generate for the New Jersey region. Really excited to join you. I am coming from the Board of Public Utilities, and prior to that, a former Chief of Staff of now Senator Zwicker, who is back there in the back and will heckle me and will argue about whose energy is actually possible, and it's mine. So it's really excited to be here, and similar to Damian, I too believe in man-made climate change, and it's really disingenuous to have conversations that aren't based in scientific reality and consensus. We, as the state of New Jersey, are constantly negatively impacted by the effects of global warming and climate change. We can't even get through a rainstorm without flooding. So that's all the proof you need about what we're trying to accomplish in all of our work. And I think we're all committed to making sure that we have a future for the generations behind us. So thanks, Eric.
You're welcome. Thanks for those introductions. I do have, just so you know, pre-planned about 12 questions. No, actually 10. But we probably won't get to them all. If some people have questions or they want to let us know, feel free to raise your hands near the end. But I'd like to get started with the first question I have. And it's very simple. Can you give us your thoughts on the status of offshore wind industry right now from your viewpoint as we stand today? We'll start with Janice.
Sure, I'll jump in. I think we'll talk about New Jersey, obviously, because that's what I think everyone here in this room cares about. I think New Jersey has always been at the forefront of the offshore wind industry. You know, Governor Murphy and the leadership at the BPU have always been pushing the envelope in terms of what New Jersey was going to do, the schedule we were going to do it, how aggressive we were going to be. We have the most aggressive offshore wind procurement target in the nation right now, more than New York, et cetera. And we've stuck to that. And I think, unfortunately, over maybe the last 9 months or so, there's been some negative attention, not just in New Jersey, but throughout the industry about offshore wind. But I would argue it's kind of probably just the rationalization of where everything was going to be from the beginning, right? We were very aggressive, set some really aggressive targets, and right now the industry and the world, because of things that are outside of New Jersey's control, et cetera, are adjusting. Timelines are being adjusted, prices are being adjusted, and a realistic schedule is going to emerge from that. But I think the forecast for the offshore wind industry in New Jersey is really promising. We have the leadership that's committed to it, right? Both in the front office and with the governor and at the BPU, and committed to doing everything that's necessary to keep this industry moving forward. We have great projects that have already been awarded, really exciting projects that have been bid. From my space, New Jersey is the first state to approach offshore wind transmission differently, moving from that bundled approach to really having a future-looking holistic vision about what's going to be needed in the water and onshore for the grid to be able to make the green energy transition a reality. And I think, this was a little bit of a bump in the road. Unfortunately, some, misinformation about the industry and its impacts. But I think that this is something that's just, we have a brand new industry, right? This is something that didn't exist in the state just a few years ago. And I think this is just some growing pains that we're going through, and it will be positive on the end. And this is an industry that's going to be here for decades to come and help deliver the clean energy to New Jersey that we need, because we are a coastal state that is at extreme risk from climate change. I didn't think I'd ever have to say this, but yes, we at Anbaric too believe that we are at risk from climate change, and I thought we had moved past talking about the differences between weather and climate, but apparently we haven't. But we are committed to that, and we see, we have a small part in it, but all of us collectively, we're going to make sure that this industry succeeds, and it's good for business, it's great for New Jersey's economy, but it's critical to the state's future.
Yeah. Go ahead, Crystal.
And I echo everything that Janice says. So as far as being Atlantic Shore's external affairs lead here in the state of New Jersey, it's been a lot of fun lately. It's been great. It has been a really difficult time. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It is really rough out there on the ground level, having conversations with communities, having conversations with electeds and policymakers, and just seeing the turn face away from the policy goals that they were so supportive of. And it's an unfortunate part of, life. People's opinions change. But like Janice, I also believe that this is just a unfortunate bump in the road. It's an obstacle, because any large-scale progressive process isn't easy. Doing the right thing, doing the correct thing is not easy, because if it was easy, it would be done already. So we are undertaking a tremendous infrastructure process. New Jersey has the ability to be on the forefront and change the direction of domestic power generation right here on the coast. We have the power to do that, no pun intended. And we should be looking at that with a sense of pride. And it's unfortunate right now, due to misinformation and the dangers related to misinformation, we're losing sight of that goal. But nothing worth doing isn't without its difficulties. It isn't without its challenges. And my colleagues and I, from different developers to transmission to policymakers to environmentalists, all believe in the work that we're doing and the necessity of the work that we're doing. And we need to just continue the course and recognize that this is an investment in ourselves right now, as well as our clean energy future for the state and for the eastern seaboard and the country at large.
Thanks. Damian?
All storms eventually pass. And I think New Jersey on the other side of the storm is going to be incredibly strong. And not just strong for the Northeast, but really strong for the U.S. as it relates to offshore wind and the energy transition. And that is something to be very proud of. Everything worth fighting for is in front of us. And the opportunity that this brings is not just clean electrons into the grid and reducing emissions in our communities. It is also creating a pathway for multiple communities across New Jersey to actually be a part of a new industry. It's actually creating a localized supply chain and making it domestic energy. Every idea and policy you had for the past decade about what offshore wind could be is right in front of us. So the challenges that the industry at large faces are possible to get through. The challenge of disinformation is something we have to collectively address, because if we're quiet, the disinformation grows. And so we have to push back where we call BS. Another point to raise here is that where we stand, and especially as Attentive Energy, is that we've just brought on an additional developer into this process. More are joining the opportunity. If that's any indication that this is true promise in front of us. Our bid, and many of others who have bid into the recent solicitation, is proof that the future is in front of us. If we read any other tea leaves and we thought otherwise, we wouldn't have bid. But we did, because we believe in the promise of offshore wind, but really of how we can make it a local opportunity and actually expand it across New Jersey. It is not just a coastal opportunity. This spreads across the state, and I think that's something we have to keep in mind. And to that, again, it's a challenge, but that's why we do what we do, because we welcome it.
Thank you for that. And that leads to my next question that I'm going to ask about is transmission, right? So the Biden administration released maps in September that showed transmission and interconnection throughout the Mid-Atlantic that also shows connections between Delaware all the way up to New England. How important will something like this be for the industry to have backbones and multiple interconnections along the eastern seaboard, particularly Mid-Atlantic and the New England states? Do you think that will help really expand the offshore wind industry? How crucial to it? And we'll start with you, Janice. We'll start down there all the time.
Sure. So a few things, and maybe what I say will not necessarily be what's expected. I think what the Biden administration laid out, I think you're talking about the Climate Week announcement that they made, and focusing on transmission deployment, HVDC technology, and standardization is exciting for the industry, absolutely. I think one thing that we often talk about here for offshore wind as opposed to in Europe, right, is that offshore wind in America is a state-by-state process, right? The states are procuring the offshore wind, they're setting the targets, they're awarding the ORECs, they're setting the schedules. And that is great for the states and for driving the state's priorities, but it makes things like regionalization of transmission complicated, much more complicated. The states are paying for it essentially, right? And so it makes some of these larger multi-state initiatives more difficult than if it was a federally driven priority like it is in Europe. That said, as the industry grows, right, we move past these first mover projects into much larger scale projects. States, between New York and New Jersey, right, 20 gigawatts of potential procurement, and that's only to grow. Now you factor in Delaware, Maryland setting a very aggressive target at 8.5 gigawatts, right? If we just look at those 4 states right there, that's a tremendous amount of offshore wind that's going to be procured. And you look, and there are obviously benefits to having some sort of grid or network in the water, redundancy between the wind farms, resiliency of the network, but also a way to reduce the impact on our coastal communities, reduce the number of cables that are going to come on shore. And we all will recognize that that is where offshore wind meets the communities, and we can often have that true impact felt. So in any way that we can minimize the marine impact, the coastal impacts, of course there's going to be benefit to that. But what's going to be key is figuring out who's going to set those standards. Is there going to be a carrot or a stick from the feds in terms of the implementation of it? But how can something like that be achieved while not interfering with the schedules of procurement for generation and setting the state's goals? I think ultimately in the long term, it's where we all think we should get and need to be. It's just reconciling who's procuring the generation and what role the feds are going to have in being able to help incentivize things like a more robust transmission system.
All right. Damian?
Yeah, I'll just add that, again, this is New Jersey showing leadership in that they're trying to prevent a bowl of spaghetti to fall across the entire, shoreline, and that's good. It takes planned transmission to really take effect and where the direction all this is headed. I'll say that, some projects are the equivalent of the power generation of a nuclear plant. And so the interconnection process is very important to identify the best and ideal places to make that landing. As one example also of, we also bid into New York's third solicitation, and, we're interconnecting to an active fossil generating plant in Queens. The goal being that going up the East River, we plan on having offshore wind replace that active fossil generation. And that is an interconnection opportunity there. And I see a lot of that planned transmission work coming in New Jersey, where I think that is the opportunity going forward.
Crystal?
So obviously Atlantic Shores as a developer, we're not in the business of transmission, but we also understand that good transmission policy reduces risks for our project as well as reduces pricing. And having clarity of focus of where we're going to connect to the grid is also really important. And I believe both of my colleagues touched on it. When there is an established policy, transmission is set and is making sense. It allows us as offshore wind developers to focus offshore, so we're not doing a bunch of spaghetti through communities. So you don't have a bunch of developers having to try and figure something out one-off. And that's why the state agreement approach here in the state of New Jersey was such an important milestone, because as new players come into the role, if there is a set connection point, there's less disturbances to our local communities. So it's really important from the federal government all the way down to the state government to have that clarity of thought and a plan that encapsulates all of the players coming into the offshore wind field.
Thank you. So one thing I wanted to point out, and it was a report that came out last year, and I know I didn't put this in the prep, and I apologize for that. But last year, MISO, there was a report from NERC that showed MISO and other RTOs were seeing less generation coming on than leaving. And also looking at the global world as it is today, global world, right? Two words like that. But looking at what's happening in the world today, how important is it to our nation and our state and our region and the country to think about, the procurement of this energy, not just from the clean energy aspect, also a national strategic necessity at this point, to make sure we have the power available, make sure we're building domestic energy here that's for America, that's developed by America. What are your thoughts on that? How important do you think it is? Anyone? We'll start with anybody.
Do you want us to comment on American-made energy versus other?
No. What I was saying is how, from a national strategic initiative, how important do you think?
No, I'm just joking only because the last speaker again kind of stuck in the point that policymakers have this positive negative choice, and we never even heard a sentence there about the value of American energy security.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Creating a domestic energy source,
right,
and not being reliant on the fluctuations of fossil generation and fuels that drastically impact our economy on a monthly basis now. And so if a country does X in another part of the world, that affects gas prices here in New Jersey.
Yeah.
And so, I think the industrialization policy that's taking place under the Biden administration and also leadership at the state and local level to not only create that level of procurement so that you can actually incentivize supply chain development, manufacturing ability, bring those efforts here to actually domesticate some of these sources is critical, right? Having blades and the cells manufactured in the Northeast and having those local suppliers be able to feed into that process, that's critical. Because not only are we expanding the coalition behind us that support and see the opportunity of offshore wind, it's creating jobs in the backyard. And so to me, it's a win-win scenario, not only as you're addressing climate change, but it further reduces the fluctuation of fossil fuels and the issue and the impact that brings on this issue.
Yeah. I feel like Damian hit the nail on the head when it comes to almost looking at domestic policy and the strength that, having domestic power energy that is United States American-based and generated means. And I'm not going to pretend that I'm up on my geopolitical knowledge, but when you brought that up, it made me think of right as the Ukrainian war was kicking off, countries in Europe who were receiving Soviet or Russian gas and energy.
Same country. They just changed the name. Come
Okay.
on, let's be honest.
They literally had to pivot because all of a sudden they're like, well, we can't accept this fuel anymore, so what are we going to do? And that, for a lot of those countries, they had to double down on their clean energy goals. And while that's something that was happening over in Europe, that was something that we were also thinking about here at home, where we get our fuel from. If we can get our fuel or if we can get our energy from home, we are in the control room, we are in the driver's seat of that. And that's something that I think in the conversations does sometimes get lost, kind of the political and the policy and the homeland security aspect of the importance of generating American-based energy on top of the fact that we get to bring an industry into the state. That's a conversation that, I try and bring up when I get the opportunity to be on these panels, that New Jersey has the opportunity to be the offshore wind hub for the Northeast. Like, we can bring an entire new industry to the state of New Jersey. We have the wind port, we have EEW, we have the potential to build nacelles, we have the potential to be a blade manufacturer, we have the potential to reintegrate an industry back into the state of New Jersey. And more specifically, even though we're looking at it a statewide approach, we can give South Jersey, who is often not given the shine it deserves, an opportunity to be a player on the state level, the national level, and the world as an offshore wind hub. And that is so critically important. And in the conversations about whales and visibility, we lose the actual economic benefit of what offshore wind can mean for the state of New Jersey.
And I would just add, and I think I'm safe in saying this, we see offshore wind as a part of the energy mix, right? Offshore wind, onshore wind, solar, hydrogen, small modular nuclear, right? This is a piece of it, and it's part of the larger conversation about where the United States gets its energy from in a forward-looking way. I don't think any of us would say that offshore wind is going to be the only source of power for our nation, but it is a viable, significant amount of energy that can be captured in our water and delivered cleanly to our shores that can help with the clean energy transition. But I don't think any of us are here saying that we are absolutists thinking that is the only way to go. It is a large part of the conversation and the discussion, though.
Wait, there's other energy sources?
What about fusion? You guys, fusion? Anyone for fusion? No?
Also, shout out to my Seton Hall diplomacy professors for getting me ready for that geopolitics question.
Yeah.
There you go. Thank you. So the next question I have for you, currently, what do you think New Jersey is there anything else New Jersey can do to help facilitate projects or facilitate the supply chain growth for the industry in the state of New Jersey? Anything they should be taking a look at, maybe adjusting or reevaluating or doing something differently? Thoughts? And you guys, if you don't want to answer, you don't have to. But.
Rock, paper, scissors. So I want to say that, New Jersey took a strong leadership role when it came to renewables. The Clean Energy Act of 2018 by the Murphy administration really kind of got the ball rolling and opening up the solicitations, the work that the BPU has done. I see some former commissioners in the room that worked on that and voted on that, and current BPU staff and current commissioners. So I think the support and the policy has been there. I would say to help the industry, it is a team effort, right? There's a lot of things that the state can be doing, just like there's a lot of things us in the development and transmission can be doing. I think investment in our current grid infrastructure is really important. I think to a previous conversation about, transmission and, the IRA and the role of the federal government, but investment in, our grid infrastructure in PJM is really, really important. And that's a little bit of a team effort. It's going to take investments from a lot of different people, but that's something that is really, really good. And it's also just a general support for the policies and being really proud of those policies. And I know EDA and the Wind Institute is actually ramping this up, and they've been doing a great job helping our local talent in the state of New Jersey get plugged in and get the training that they need to be a part of this clean energy revolution. Specifically, obviously, I'm biased, offshore wind, so they can be players. I think a continued support of that. And I think, simply put, just believing in us as we believe in the state of New Jersey, because that's what brought us here, and keeping the faith on that. You know, obviously, administrations change, and when administrations change, policies change. But for the right now, just making sure that our projects, our transmission goals, our clean energy goals are on a pathway that, you know, if we have someone who may buy into our previous speaker's thought process and want to go in a complete different direction, that could be the detriment to clean energy goals and addressing climate change and global warming, that, you know, our projects are in a pipeline and a pathway that they do not lose focus and they do not get derailed by the whims of misinformation, by the whims of people, and obviously just an investment in the communities that can benefit, investment in the training, as I said before, when it comes to making sure that our supply chain and procurement are up to snuff. So those are just little things that I think the state can continue to do, and that's what they're doing right now. And, you know, they've been great partners to us, and we wouldn't be in New Jersey if we didn't feel a sense of camaraderie and partnership with the state.
And I would just add, you know, New Jersey, as I mentioned earlier, was bold, right? When they made the first project awards, the state didn't wait for anyone, right? It was a non-cooperative federal administration, and they moved ahead with it anyway. And I think the state, one of the biggest things the state has done and can continue to do is be predictable in its procurement schedule, both for generation and for transmission, because I think that is so critical to companies that are planning where we're going to participate, where we're going to put our development dollars, but also on the supply chain side of things, right? We all have heard about supply chain constraints up and down the industry and how long our lead lines are for procuring cable, equipment, et cetera, and giving a predictability to that side of the industry so that they can ramp up factories, plan their production, et cetera, is going to be really critical for the states to be able to meet those targets. So I think New Jersey has done, I think, you know, a standout job among all of the states that are procuring offshore wind is setting a schedule, sticking to that schedule, and being very predictable about it in a way that the industry can respond to. And I think it's someplace where other states could learn from as well.
Yeah, and I also just want to give a special shout out to the NJBPU, especially like the wind, the clean energy division and the wind team that has to get this stuff moving. They do a lot of work. So I just want to acknowledge the hard work that's happening, because there's actual people that have to go through all of our bids and have to make decisions. So just want to acknowledge them.
And I just maybe like to close out the thought that, you know, when sometimes folks say, you know, New Jersey took a bet on offshore wind. Bets don't work out, right? New Jersey did an investment. Investments work out, right? An investment on the future of manufacturing and supply chain, and also a future workforce. And so you look at examples like, I mean, just look at New Jersey Windport. You know, that was New Jersey leadership to say, this is what we're doing. You know, build it and they will come. If you compare that effort with other large infrastructure efforts on offshore wind in other states, I won't name them, but New Jersey's ahead. And that takes leadership, and that takes the right kind of incentives to bring the industry home and make sure that's developed here in New Jersey. And so to emphasize also what Janice said, you know, it's certainty and predictability, and that goes a long way because offshore wind is part of a global supply chain. And so if there's a scarce amount of time, resources, and talent, these companies make decisions based on where the market is going to be best. And there's a reason why they keep making that investment for New Jersey and putting in these bids.
Thanks for that. I want to talk about the IRA real quick. The IRA was intended to help clean energy projects. How does this help projects in New Jersey with the tax incentives and the apparatuses that are out there to help these projects move along? And we can start with you, Damian, if you want.
I think, again, what the federal government did in this space is created a lot more avenues to secure necessary funding. It creates opportunities to make some of these projects be accelerated and commit that investment here in the state. I think people just need to know one key thing about the IRA, is that it goes well beyond offshore wind. It goes well beyond just large-scale renewables. I mean, there's so many incentives in this program and this piece of legislation that if you really start uncovering it at the state and local level, it has huge ramifications, not only for clean energy transition, from electric vehicle rebates to ways that you can actually get your home more efficient. And I think it's an opportunity to kind of step back for a minute and say, there's all of these policies in place, and I think as they roll out and become effective, you'll see this more in your community.
Thanks. Crystal?
I mean, I feel like Damian hit the nail on the head. The IRA is just a tremendous boon for any renewables in transition, and it makes it tangible and affordable, not just for large-scale developers trying to do work, but for everyday Americans. And that's what's going to make a difference when it comes to, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, transitioning away from dirtier methods of energy. So it's just one player in the larger game of trying to move us away from dirtier forms of energy and moving us to more homegrown, domestic, renewable sources.
Thanks. Janice, thoughts?
I don't think anything to add to what my
Okay.
fellow panelists already said. Thank you.
No, that's good. I wanted to touch on a topic, thinking about community, being involved in community. And can you talk about what your companies are doing in Jersey from a community aspect, participating in community, partnering with nonprofits, things of those nature? I know, the typical business of business is what it is, right? But also being a part of the community is important. So I just thought it might be good for you guys to touch on what you guys are doing locally to be out there. And we can start with you, Crystal, sorry.
So this is a question that is really close to my heart. Obviously, external affairs lead. A lot of my interactions are with community level all the way up to kind of state level. So one of Atlantic Shore's core values is being a good neighbor, and that's something that we take very seriously. So we constantly encourage our staff, myself included, to be in the communities that we're working. It's not enough to sit in our offices, and sometimes our offices are our living rooms for those of us who work from home, and do stuff remotely. So we like to be visible when at all possible in the communities across the state. So that looks like us supporting, the Atlantic City Community Fund, the Arts Foundation, the Boys and Girls Club on the very hyper-local level. It is supporting, the different chambers, like the African American Chamber and the Hispanic Chamber on the statewide level. And it's everything in between. So constantly we're going out, we're meeting with people, we're having standing meetings with the communities that are impacted by our project, and we're learning about what they need. And this is something that I brought over as the former head of the Office of Clean Energy Equity, is also listening to what the community says that they need. So what are they looking for? What have other large-scale developers or industries done to them in the past that gave them a really sour taste in the mouth? And it's being really transparent and honest about what we're able to do and what we're not able to do. And it's bigger than just, the dollar amounts, right? So for us, for at least Project 1, for the city of Atlantic City, where our onshore route comes in from the ocean, we're committed to at least $160 million to Atlantic City itself due to investments into the community. But it's also just being present, and it's building those relationships with the community leaders, with the elected officials, and being available and being a number that they can call to ask questions. So for us, in our ethos, it's to be that good neighbor. It's not about us coming in and bigfooting our way in and throwing money at you and, you're going to love us. It's like, let us earn your respect. Let us earn the right to be here. Obviously, there's a tension because we have a business that we have to execute. We have a contract with the state of New Jersey that we have to execute, but we can do it in a really authentic and intentional way. And I don't want to rattle off all the different things that we've invested in, but for us, it's, we see something that is really important to a community, and we're like, how can we help? And if it is, you need us to volunteer, we'll do it. If you need us to sponsor something, we'll do it. Because we're invested in the state of New Jersey. We want to be here for decades. We want to be part of the fabric of the state. And that's something that I care deeply about personally, and that's something that Atlantic Shores cares deeply about. And that's also why I work for them, because if they didn't mean it and it weren't being genuine about it, I wouldn't be here. So that's some of the work we do.
Damian?
Yeah, I mean, Crystal raises tons of great points and a lot of similarities to the efforts that we have going on through Attentive Energy. And I mean, there's one thing, if everyone just would walk away from today as knowing is a core element of community engagement or community sponsorships, really anything we do in the communities here, is education, right? It's education that goes in both directions. We are, as developers, are being educated on what the communities need, and we're educating them on the opportunity, the challenges, and also what's ahead. So that two-way communication has to continue. It needs to be expanded upon. It's a lot of the initiatives that we put together. It's a lot of the time we spend as developers to understand that. I mean, here's one anecdote. You know, we're looking at civic organizations to increase their capacity, especially in overburdened communities, to actually be a part of the conversation. And there's a lack of time and resources about how to participate in the offshore wind industry. And even just saying the fact of, hey, there's going to be jobs at ports. You know, ports sounds a lot different to different communities, right? So if you're in Newark and Elizabeth, ports has a different meaning than when you say ports down in Salem and South Jersey, right? So even those things are important to understand how you engage communities on the opportunity. You know, I think there's a huge effort underway just on education when, you know, we've, you know, sponsored the Monmouth County Girl Scouts. And what we've learned even in our efforts in New York is that if you can really get in front of that middle school range and get that opportunity and understanding of what's coming in front of them, it makes a huge difference of that early investment. And so we're looking for opportunities like that across the state. You know, we've engaged organizations and individuals from every single county in New Jersey. And, you know, that was challenging, and it was over, you know, a course of, you know, several years. But through that, we have a fairly good sense of what we have to offer and make that a big difference here in New Jersey.
Thanks. Janice, thoughts?
Sure. Just to add on to what's already been said, you know, much like Crystal said, Anbaric so has kind of taken the motto in all the places we work, where we don't want to develop where we're not wanted, right? And how do we build those relationships and honestly help demystify some of what transmission is and some of what it means, right? You know, I often say if you weren't there for the few weeks when we were doing construction in your area, you wouldn't know we'd been there, right? And helping people understand that, you know, understanding what's going to go on between their roads or what's going to be developed in their communities, because transmission projects last for decades, right? And we want to make sure that we are welcome from the onset throughout the lifespan of a project that will go through many of us, right? So we've really made that commitment and work really hard to build relationships from day one, right? From when we're thinking about where we might make landfall, where a route might go, you know, and have those conversations right from the beginning so that people aren't hearing about it from elsewhere, they're hearing about it from us directly, which I think is really important for people to build that trust.
Yeah. And Eric, if I could add
Sure.
one last thing. I think it's also really important to acknowledge that even in our best efforts, sometimes we get it wrong. And, you know, I think there's also the responsibility of us in the industry to acknowledge that we've made a misstep and do what we can to make it right and mitigate those future mistakes. Because it's one thing to say, you know, we're doing everything right, everyone loves us. But, you know, the reality is sometimes a little bit different, but it's also really important for us to take responsibility for any missteps and, you know, try and undo any harm from previous engagements. Like when we talk about overburdened communities, environmental justice, you know, there are institutional reasons why communities are in the mindset that they are. And sometimes we may continue that pattern and unbeknownst to us and definitely not intentional, but it's also when you are called out, recognizing your misstep and then working with those stakeholders to make it right.
Thank you for that. And just so you guys know, I am on the board of directors for the Girl Scouts of Central and Southern New Jersey. So if you guys are ever looking for a nonprofit, happy to introduce you to one. And
It's like a
the
cookie.
cookies
It's like
are
a
coming
cookie
out.
set. Yeah, hold on, wait a minute. It's like,
Go ahead. Sorry. And the cookies are coming soon, I hear. So, and I like cookies. So, Next question I got for you. Last year, the BPU awarded some onshore transmission into a single connection. Do you think we need to have more than just one point of transmission, and should the BPU be considering other places to connect and also more procurement of transmission? Thoughts on that? We can start with you, Janice.
I'll start.
Go ahead.
You get to go first.
Yeah.
I'll go
Janice.
first on that one for that fateful day last October. I think New Jersey, a few things. Kidding aside, what New Jersey did with the SAA partnering with PJM for that first in the nation transmission solicitation was huge, right? I think it was a little bit of, proof of concept. If we bid this, will they come? And they did, right? I think other states wondered if what New Jersey was doing was crazy, and would developers respond? And I think, the response the state got was overwhelmingly clear, right? I think 13 or 14 developers, 79 projects were bid. It was a big deal. There was a lot of interest from the industry with really creative solutions presented. And the BPU made a huge award, not some of the things that we were hoping they would do, but understandably so. They made a huge, gigantic award in terms of what they did, in terms of saying this much energy is going to go to this place, and here's how it's going to get there. And it demystified a lot of those questions and gave predictability to communities, to the developers, et cetera. And they've already started the process for the next phase of that, right? Back in April, they kicked off the process for SAA 2.0, right? And we're very focused on that. Dean's substation in South Brunswick, 3,500 megawatts, et cetera. And we're waiting for that to move forward. But I will say, building on what Crystal said earlier, the BPU works really hard on this stuff and takes it very seriously. And after the first SAA, they kind of did postmortem interviews with all of the developers. What went right? What went wrong? What could we do better next time, in a really sincere and genuine way that I think is going to very much inform the next solicitation. But just going back to one thing that I think still remains a huge question, not just for New Jersey, and it goes back to the question about the IRA, there's still a huge question as to the applicability of the ITC for independently procured transmission.
Yeah.
And that weighed heavily on the decision that was made by the BPU last year, and still remains unresolved. And it's something that I think is critical for the federal side of things, right, for the IRS to issue that guidance to give some certainty to not just New Jersey, but other states that are looking at different ways to competitively procure transmission, to set that to bed one way or the other. We obviously hope that it is applicable, and we think it should be, but I think an answer to that one way or another is key to moving some of this stuff forward.
Thanks. Any other comments? Crystal, Damian?
I mean, I think I touched on it before. I mean, the SAA was very helpful because it gave us, this is where you're coming onshore, and this is where you're ending up. And it takes a lot of the guesswork off of the developers, who can then focus on the development on offshore, right? Every time we have to figure out how we're going to bring our electricity or our electrons onshore and then to a substation, that is an added expense, that's added energy, no pun intended. I'm talking about human expenditure of energy, but it also is a disturbance to the communities. And then you have a bunch of different developers trying to spec something out, and it confuses the community, and that can build some resentment. So anytime we can simplify the onshore transmission, it helps not just the developers, but it also helps the communities as well. So, Atlantic Shores, we got our award prior to the SAA, so we know what life looked like before it, and we're still operating because that's where we are, and that's a pipeline we're in. But there is real value to the state agreement approach in continuing of identifying transmission points, so we can just focus on the generation.
Yeah, I would echo that point, and saying as, a developer that's just bid in for the first time to New Jersey's competitive process, knowing exactly where the landing is and how to, technically think through all those next steps was something new for us, and I think also welcome as an opportunity going forward. And I'd say that, again, just in view of what's happening on the other side of the Hudson River, they're looking at a very similar approach going forward. So again, this is another opportunity where New Jersey's taking a leadership position.
So thanks for that. I think we have like 1 minute left, so I thought, and Ray's telling me we have to get off soon. So final thoughts, and we'll start with Crystal, Damian, then Janice. Go ahead, Crystal.
Oh, just general thoughts?
General thoughts. Whatever you want to talk about.
Just whatever you want.
So I would say my final thoughts, on behalf of myself and on behalf of Atlantic Shores, it's an ultimate pleasure and a reward to be able to work for the residents of the state of New Jersey. We know it's a really difficult time in offshore wind, obviously for those who bid prior to the pandemic and prior to the Ukrainian war. But we ask that you hold the faith, because we are committed deeply to the state of New Jersey. We are committed deeply to our goals of being a good neighbor, leading with science, environmental responsibility, and putting safety first. And we want to continue to do so, not just for Project One, but for all of the projects that we have the potential to developing in the future. We want to develop clean energy, and we want to provide it to the state. And I'm biased because I'm born and raised Jersey girl. I want to bring something home to the state of New Jersey. So I want to thank you for this time, and also just because we had that person before this, climate change is real, and so is global warming, and we have a responsibility to do what we can to mitigate it. I'm sure there's more nuanced conversations that we can have, and I'm not a doctor, and nor am I a climate scientist, but I'm a person that lives with the effects of climate change every day, and I think we all are. So I ask of you to look into yourself and figure out, how can I do better for our climate, our world right now, and how can we do better for our future? And, a little bit requires offshore wind, but, there are other things that we can be doing as well. So I want to thank you for your time.
Also, thank you for the opportunity to speak about offshore wind, but also the work that we do. And I look forward to hearing from you all and get an opportunity to talk to you after this panel. Myself, the Attentive Energy team is here. We're here to discuss the opportunity and the proposal we just put into New Jersey. And we're very excited after 4 years at it, now really being a part of the opportunity to actually compete and also kind of turn this into reality. And so I think there's a common theme that everyone here wants to be a part of the solution space. We all have to have a common objective. And yes, there's times to compete, and yes, there's times to come together, not only as an industry, but also as New Jersey, to kind of push back against disinformation for all the wrong reasons. And I think that's an area where we should continue to grow in.
You have a great stage, Mom.
I will just thank Erick for moderating. Thank you very much for the BIA for having this event today. I think all of us in different configurations get to speak to different groups of people, and I think it's great for the BIA to pull together an event that's focused on energy specifically and concerns like offshore wind and the opportunity it presents. And I think particularly for this room, business people who are concerned about the economic future of our state, offshore wind and renewable energy is going to be a critical piece of that and has a tremendous opportunity. I mean, this is a new industry. That is a once in a multiple generations opportunity that the state has in front of it to become the home and the hub to a new industry that's going to have not only just benefit New Jersey, but the region and the nation. And I think we are hopeful that we, see the positive in that and look at it from a position of fact and evidence of the opportunity that it presents, but also the necessity that our state has to be taking these conversations really seriously. And I think that's what most of the people, in this room think when it comes to the conversation about our energy future. So look forward to further conversations. The Anbaric team is also here. That would be me. So I look forward to talking with everyone, but thank you again for the opportunity.
Well, thank you. And a round of applause for you, our panelists.